And I was just wondering if there's anything I can do on my end for you all to see me more as a girl.
When you go out in public like this, you have to be brought to psychological counseling. If you continue to behave like this, you're going to be committed to an institution.
In the case of transgender TikToker Dylan Mulvaney, who I will admit is pretty cringe, Michael has called for Dylan Mulvaney to be institutionalized. That's what we do to serial killers who plead not guilty by virtue of mental insanity. We lock them up, deprive them of their liberty, take them away from their family, and that's what apparently folks like Michael Knowles think should be done to outspoken transgender adults, because he disapproves of their lifestyle, he disapproves of their beliefs, and he disapproves of their words. Now, I'm here to suggest that that totalitarian approach to debating social issues is fundamentally inconsistent with conservative principles of individual liberty, limited government, and the classically liberal society that conservatives in the US have always wanted to conserve. But it's also remarkably short-sighted. About 30% of the United States identifies as socially conservative. About 23% identifies as Catholic, which is Michael's faith. And I'm from New England, so that I know that a lot of those Catholics are actually pretty libbed out. So what you have is a minority of the country, a small minority, that actually holds ultra-traditionalist beliefs on social issues. So if we want to start having the majority rules approach of suppressing lifestyles you don't approve of shutting down ideas, of banning ideas and lifestyles that aren't in alignment with your values, that is not going to go well for my friends on the religious right.
I want to press you here because you're falling on the bathroom example when you've also talked about involuntary commitment. And I think on the spectrum of where the law intervenes, the bathroom is both kind of the least, charged issue to kind of fall back on, and saying at a certain point of delusion, I think someone who disagrees with me on this issue should be confined. I want to hear you defend that point rather than the bathroom access.
Well, I think that what's very important here is prudence. This is one of those forgotten virtues that people in our highly ideological age think that we need to have a manifesto written in 5 bullet points on a napkin to answer every question. But for example, if someone is a man who has fallen into the transgender rabbit hole, and for him it is, as it historically has been for pretty much everybody, a sexual fetish, a paraphilia of cross-dressing that is largely driven by pornography today. But that man still understands that he's a man. This is just a little weird thing that he does at home, and it makes him have a thrill, and okay, fine, we live in a fallen world. I wouldn't suggest we need to commit that man. But there is a spectrum here of irrationality and insanity. Let's call it what it is. And so if a man is convinced that he really is a woman, like in some of those viral videos we've all seen of the big burly man screaming in the bodega, my name is ma'am, and he's acting out in a way that is really disorderly and disrupting the public and harmful to himself. For instance, if he wants to chop off his own healthy body parts and cause all sorts of destruction to himself, then I think not only is it the right of society to take some action here to restore order, but I think it's only compassionate for that person. I think it's a very selfish and shallow kind of liberalism that says that when people have mental problems, we ought to just let them out on the street, often to die of exposure or to go do drugs in some back alley in San Francisco. No, we owe them help. Brad asks, who am I to tell people what to do? Why would I use the force of government? We live in America. America is at least supposed to be a self-government. You're a citizen with faculties of reason and a moral conscience. You can perceive truth, and it is not only your right, but your responsibility to do so, to help your fellow countrymen.
I'll give you a moment. Yes, absolutely.
Can you explain, Michael, why you want the government to be the arbiter of truth, to decide what beliefs? I mean, I've lived through the government tell us there were WMDs in Iraq, lie to us every which way about COVID, and you are saying that the government and the people that run it should be an arbiter of truth and then should involuntarily commit and basically lock people up who don't meet their perception of the truth. Can you explain to me, as a matter of prudence, how that could possibly be a good idea.
Well, I'm not saying that the government is the arbiter of truth, of course not, but we have civil authority to establish and to enforce laws. And so we can either establish and enforce laws on the basis of pure will, a man who says, I very much want to be a woman, and so that's what we're going to do, completely divorced from reality and the moral order, or we can establish and enforce laws as a matter of interpretation, to believe that there is such a thing as objective reality and a moral order and a natural law that we are then translating into the civil law. Traditionally, in our country and in all states, we have pursued the latter. In our age that now seems to be increasingly untethered from reality, where people will mock the very notion of objective truth, we say that that cannot happen. But to my points earlier, the law will say something, inevitably. The government is not some foreign entity. We live in America, where we have some say in our government, even still today, and the law must necessarily say something. Either the women get, the reason I keep going to the bathrooms is because it's just so clear, but you can use the sports teams, you can use...
I think the involuntary commitment one is relevant, though, because I think, this is not the level of force that Mr. Polumbo is worried about as worried about bathroom
I suppose...
rules.
Right, I mean, bathrooms are smaller scale, but what I would say is that these issues are complicated, and they should be decentralized. Let a business decide their own bathroom policies. I've been to a lot of places in liberal cities that solve this by having single-stall unisex bathrooms. Fantastic. Don't have a one-size-fits-all solution crammed on the whole country.
I'm going to stay on the commitment question for a second so Mr. Polumbo can field a question himself. Certainly the government does draw lines around some people who should be committed, whether due to risk to others or sometimes risk to themselves. I'm curious how you, Mr. Polumbo, feel the government should respond. Is it right to commit someone for treatment for anorexia, which does not put them as a danger to others, purely because we believe them to be a danger to themselves, to have a false belief about their body?
I think there has to be a very high threshold for civil commitment. We've seen it horribly abused in the past in this country. But I think it has to be a direct danger to themselves or others, right? Their physical safety. So trans or not trans, if somebody is a danger, a suicide risk, or if they're a threat to others, then we can discuss involuntary commitment. But what we're talking about here is essentially saying, well, we think somebody has deluded and wrong beliefs, so they should be locked up. I mean, that would have gotten that's the approach that had people wanting to lock up and kill Galileo, for daring to suggest that the Earth was not the center of the universe. I don't think we all know the truth. That's part of the process of discovering the truth. And let me just say, and I'm not saying this, but a large swath of the country thinks that the Catholic faith, believing in a God, is a deluded belief, is a delusion. Should they want to have you committed?
No, the majority of Americans still believe in God.
I don't think...
Maybe not in 50 years,
All right,
but
so
today they still do.
in the interest of the best use of...